Hey guys, welcome back to Nat One Videos. Today in the video I'm going to be looking at building some standing stones. Very simple to do, little diorama, but first I wanted to take a look at some real standing stones. This is Staunton Longstone, just outside Staunton in Gloucestershire. And we're also going to take a look at some other ones. So yeah, let's have a look at some real standing stones.
For as long as I can remember, I have been fascinated by things that are ancient, things that it seems time has forgotten. Old castles and ruins capture my imagination, but standing stones harken back to a very mystical era in the history of the British Isles, the era of Druids. When I stand beside stones like these, my imagination runs wild. What took place in these areas? Who has stood here before me? And why do these still feel significant? Perhaps I'm fascinated because these stones don't just shape the landscape, but they have also helped to shape the culture and folklore of this country. Then again, maybe it's just because whenever I was a kid, I loved reading Asterix comic books, and Obelix was my favourite character, mining menhirs with his pickaxe, carrying them around on his back like a school bag and never being allowed to touch a drop of the magic potion that had been brewed by Getafix, the Druid, because he fell into the cauldron as a child, leaving him with superhuman strength.
So next on the list, my little tour of local standing stones is the Harold Stones outside Trellick. Apparently these stones were to commemorate a great battle by the Saxon king Harold of Wessex over the Britons, but the timeline doesn't really make sense on that one because the dates on these stones actually go back to Neolithic, Bronze Age, kind of between the Neolithic and the Bronze Age. There is another local legend that's my favourite one, which says that these stones were actually thrown here by a giant called Jack O'Keefe whenever he was having a competition with another giant. So that's my favourite one. They're awesome.
So the fact that standing stones often have multiple different myths and legends surrounding them really highlights just how old these things are. In each significant period in history, the people of the time have attached their own stories to these ancient monuments, and it seems in many cases that historians still really don't know exactly how they got here or what they were for. All they can do is apply their best guess, and in the case of standing stones, the likelihood is that the stones were used in religious practices of the time. It is thought that these were the settings for elaborate religious ceremonies which may have connected to beliefs about fertility of people, animals and crops. Perhaps there were religious practices concerning the dead, their afterlife and their influence on the living. It's mysteries like these that really fueled the imaginations of fantasy fiction writers such as George MacDonald, William Morris, J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, and subsequently in turn has fed into the shaping and forming of the world of Dungeons and Dragons, which we all know and love. Mystery, magic, myths and legends are not based in facts, but they are most certainly based in history and the traditions of storytelling that have been passed down through the ages. It is interesting to me that previous generations have attached their own myths to specific sites, but in the modern world the stories seem to have stopped. Only the old myths about these sites will be retold, and that is the beauty of Dungeons and Dragons. We can create our own myths and legends, which makes features such as Druidic Standing Stones perfect for fueling the imagination of any dungeon master and their intrepid adventurers.
This is Heston Break, and these stones are a little bit different to the ones I've showed you already.
The distance between the different sites I've shown you in this video is about 20 minutes drive, so not very far at all. My original plan for this video was to visit 5 or 6 different sites, but my daughter was getting tired and we had to call it a day. These sites are dotted throughout the length and breadth of the country, but in certain areas they are more prevalent. And here we are very lucky to be bang smack in the middle of a hotspot. It blows my tiny mind that these ancient monoliths were carved and erected as far back as the Neolithic and Bronze Age. These are the markers of the dawn of civilization in this country, and we can still stand beside them and touch them to this day. What if these stones had never been carved? What if the people of that time had not made their attempt to connect with something outside of themselves in their practices? Would we be left with a landscape that would still be beautiful, but perhaps less significant to who we actually are? Maybe without these mysterious markers of history, we wouldn't get to enjoy the fanciful games based in storytelling that we play today. For me, these stones will always fuel my imagination, and what better way to celebrate that than to build a diorama. Even though the act of crafting shapes like standing stones seems so basic and easy, while I am crafting I will often be lost in my imagination of a bygone era. And standing stones tell me stories of reaching out and trying to touch the unknown, connecting with nature and perhaps meddling with mysteries that in some cases are best left unexplored. But the inquisitive nature of mankind has to reach out and touch the mysterious.
So I'm going to build a little mini or diorama, and I think I'm just trying to copy the Harold stones. Really nice to get out of the house and do something different. Take some inspiration, and now I'm going to go home and build something. Alright, let's go.
Okay guys, I'm going to try and make this a very quick tutorial on the easiest diorama that you will ever make, and it looks fantastic in game on the tabletop. I'm going to be using XPS foam for the base, and I'm using PRS foam for the stones because it takes texturing with a brush really nicely, as you will see shortly. PRS is very easy to carve, so just use a kitchen knife and cut your desired shapes. You could easily just carve rough shapes and they will end up looking good, but as I had my little field trip, I'm drawing out my shapes to roughly match my visual references of Harold stones. Once you have your shapes drawn, you simply carve away the foam you don't need, and then you can do some finer carving to bevel the edges and really hone in the shape that you want. Next step is to hot glue your stones into position. I didn't make my spacing to scale against the rail stones, as I thought a closer grouping would look better on the tabletop, but I left a good amount of space so that your minis can be placed in and around the stones really easily. Once your stones are glued in, you can bevel off the edges of your XPS foam. It really doesn't matter if these cuts are rough. In fact, the rougher the better, because that will add to the depth and texture of the piece. And here you can see me using the brush texturing technique on the PRS foam that I mentioned earlier. I've yet to find a better method to get this weathered sandstone kind of look. Moving on to the ground textures, I just cover the base in some hot glue before sprinkling on some bark that I blended up. The hot glue will burn into and melt the XPS foam, but in this case that adds to part of the desired effect, giving the ground an uneven, more natural look, and the bark makes for a fantastic mixed grade texture. Then we move on to our old friend black paint and Mod Podge. This helps to seal the project and gives a great base coat before your paint job. I then use some graphite grey over the whole project. Some of this coat will show through very subtly at the end, but for this project I am going for a more browny look with my stones to match Harold's stones. So it's time to bust out the burnt umber paint, again roughly painting over the whole base, no big deal if you miss a few spots, and then I overbrushed the standing stones in this colour too. I then lightened up the burnt umber with titanium white to get a more tan-like colour and dry brushed the three stones. So in my reference of the Harold stones there are some greys and browns, so I used green grey to do a very light dry brushing and highlights, making sure to pick out all of the edges on the rocks with the lighter tones. I'm actually really pleased with this paint scheme, and I will be using brown tones and the green grey a lot more in future projects. For the grassy areas I mixed up my own green with cadmium yellow and cobalt blue, and I painted all over the base. It really is no big deal if you miss a few spots, because the browns and greys showing through will just add to the effect of a muddy field. Then it's time for some grass flocking, covering the whole base in a watered down PVA glue and applying a grass flock. I used a static grass applicator, but if you don't have one, don't worry about it, because you can just sprinkle it on with your fingers and it will still look fantastic. One feature that I saw on all the stones that I saw today was lichen and moss. So for the lichen, I just stippled on some yellow ochre in a few spots, and I did the same with some neutral grey that I had lightened up with some titanium white. And for the moss, I just used a little PVA glue and sprinkled on some very fine foam flock. The last on the list is grass tufts, and these just help to add a little variation to the look of the grassy area. And that is your authentic Druidic Stones scattered terrain diorama complete. Anyone can do this, and it really couldn't be any simpler.
So there we go guys, that's the end of today's little project. Super fun and very easy little project to make. So if you're new to crafting and you've been intending to try it out, this is a great place to start. Very easy to make, and yeah, you'll have a lot of fun doing it at the same time. If you guys enjoyed the little walk around of the standing stones and the voiceover I did at the beginning, please let me know in the comments below. If you didn't enjoy it, please let me know in the comments below. And yeah, that'll help me decide if I kind of make that sort of content again in the future. So also just want to say a massive thank you as always to my patrons. You guys are awesome, and yeah, you're definitely helping me keep this thing afloat. All that's getting fed directly into the channel, materials, etc. So you guys rule. And yeah, just want to mention that I've got a Discord which you can check in the links below, and yeah, anyone's welcome to come and chat in the Discord and share your work. I would love to see what you guys are up to. And the last thing to say is that I'm still running the giveaway. I've got one more week left, so if you would like to pick up one of my pieces, you can head over to the link in the description below. And yeah, next Thursday I will be announcing the winners in a live stream on Thursday evening. So that's it for today, guys. Thank you so much, and I hope you all have a really good weekend, and I will see you next week. Thanks, bye.
Join Colin Bressy, Daniel West and myself every Sunday at 10 AM PST, that's 6 PM UK time, on the Crazy Crafter livestream featuring awesome guests every week from the crafting community. Link in the description below this video.